Welcome to today's program, and thank you for joining us. Due to the continuing concerns with COVID, we are still working and coming to you virtually. So I'm here in my home office as my guest star, but the good news is that we are here and we are ready, and we want to talk today seriously about a matter that affects all of us. Of course, I am C. Virginia Fields, former president of the Borough of Manhattan, and currently serving as president CEO of the National Black Leadership Commission on Health, which formerly was the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS. Back in November of 2019, just prior to the pandemic, we launched our change of the name, the mission, and our work to National Black Leadership Commission on Health as a way of better defining the work that we all engage. And so we're continuing to focus on HIV/AIDS, but now have included among HIV/AIDS, hepatitis C, cardiovascular disease, breast cancer, prostate cancer, sickle cell, diabetes, and mental health. All of these health diseases disproportionately impact Black African Americans. So today, with this being Mental Health Awareness Month, where we have been engaged in discussions throughout the month, and I'm sure many of you have been seeing articles. Today, our focus will be on, as far as the discussion, mental health, how adults can help by listening to young people. Unfortunately, it is all too often believed that mental health problems are primarily among adults, but we know that it is not the case. And we know mental health affects all of us, can affect all of us mentally, emotionally, physically, and today we're going to look at what are some of the things happening with our young people. And I am delighted to have as my guests two young persons who are doing extremely important work in this area. We have Rochelle Johnson, who is with the Half Hood and Holistic, actually the founder of Half Hood and Holistic, and is a Black health, mental health consultant. We're so happy to have her working with us, and she leads specifically on our mental health program in Syracuse, but actually that is now throughout the country. And we also have with us Derrian Swany, project coordinator, the Center for Practice Innovations at Columbia Psychiatry. Thanks to both of you for joining us for this discussion. And let me say that we are pleased to have this discussion as a way of creating greater awareness and education on mental health, risk, resources, and how to improve connections to behavior health. And as I mentioned, the focus today is going to be on young people and what has happened through a partnership between Columbia Psychiatry, the New York Public Library, Black Health, and made possible through support from the Leon Levy Foundation. We released a series of animations about mental health with the focus on the Black community. And since the rollout of these animations, and there are actually about 3 or 4 of them, we have been hosting mental health support groups at various locations in Bronx, Manhattan, and Syracuse. And we're looking to talk today more about how young people have responded to these group sessions. So to get us started, we're going to share a 3-minute animation, one of the animations, which is about 3 minutes. And after that, we'll get into lots of discussion. So let's roll with the animation.
Hey, what's been going on? I want to check in with you if that's okay.
What's up? Am I in trouble?
No. Just the pandemic is getting me down. I feel overwhelmed, anxious, and exhausted. I'm feeling some type of way, so I wanted to see how you're doing with school, friends, and everything that's changed over this year.
I'm fine, Everything is good.
Oh, it's good to hear. I just wanted to check in because sometimes we're struggling and might not even realize it. Like, I noticed that you've been up all night, eating less, hanging out with your friends less too. It's important that you know that I'm here for you.
Yeah, whatever. When I tried to talk to you about stuff before, it seemed like you weren't really listening, or like you felt my issues were small. Like you said that because I don't have to pay bills and because I'm young, I don't have a reason to be depressed or anxious. And that just makes me not want to say anything.
I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I grew up thinking about struggles very differently. It wasn't a thing to talk about mental wellness with family because they would call you crazy. Say all you have to do is pray on it. We were raised the way we were raised. You have to be strong and deal with it. I thought, okay, you have to hide your feelings and ignore them. But I want to change now. I've learned more because that's not healthy for either of us.
Well, okay. I guess I've had more anxiety and don't want to do much.
I get what you're going through. I want to help you get through this tough time and learn how to listen and support you better.
Okay, but I still feel like you don't get it. 'Cause you don't know what I'm going through. Sometimes my thoughts are just out of control and I can't focus on stuff. I don't even know why.
You're right. I'm sorry. I want to understand where you're coming from. What's making you feel that way?
I don't really want to talk with you about it right now. I don't want a whole lecture.
You don't have to share everything with me. Maybe there's someone in your life you do feel comfortable talking to. What would worry me is if you ignore your feelings and hope they change on their own, because they can come out later in bad ways. I've looked into some helpful things, like counselors you could talk to, or group sessions where you talk about it with other people who sometimes feel anxious, even just so you know you're not alone. As long as you're talking to someone, I'm happy.
I feel you. I guess I appreciate that you brought this up in such a chill way. I was expecting something completely different, but this felt good. But yeah, it's helpful to know that I have options. I don't know if it's that bad where I gotta talk to a therapist or whatever, but since you're cool with it, maybe I'll consider it.
Yeah, I'm looking at getting my own support. I tried free online counseling. You can call or text someone who's trained to talk about this stuff, and they don't even need to know your name. You can chat with them about whatever, but I want you to choose what works best for you.
Yeah, okay. I think it would be dope to check in with you next week to see what I'm thinking, if you're down for it.
Thank you so much. And we hope that just gives you a taste of the animations that have been put together and after focus groups with our young people. So, coming out of watching the animation, first question I'd like to pose to both of you is how can we get adolescents to engage in conversations about their struggles without frustrating them, as we saw the young lady was definitely frustrated. So let's have some conversations. Now it's time for interaction. No format, just talking. So let's go.
I can start. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me here today. The first thing that I think about when you talk about that question is how do we have conversations with adolescents, period? Right? Do we know how to talk to youth in general? Have we forged enough relationships with our youth to be able to talk about the weather or to talk about the sports games? Because that's going to be really critical to being the pathway to being able to have a conversation about mental health or any other kinds of physical health. So the first thing that I think about is relationship building, and being able to to watch our power dynamics when we talk to youth, right? We sometimes feel like we don't have to have conversations with youth because what can they teach us, or all of those things. So I think the first thing is being mindful of the relationships that we have day to day and the conversations that we have day to day with youth, because that will set the scene to be able to have a more intensive conversation about these things.
That's a great way to start, Rachel. And I'm as an aunt, that's something that I've had to put in perspective myself. I have two younger nieces, and they're very vocal. That's not something that I was able to do growing up. So I've had to change in my culture in terms of how I interact with them. But to your point, the relationship building also includes us taking a step back and really asking ourselves, from what perspective are we approaching a teenager or an adolescent? Are we inserting our own experiences, or are we trying to have a conversation so that we can really get a sense of what they're feeling, what has been going on with them, possibly even what have we been ignoring because we tend to just look at them as young. And as a young person, what kind of issues would you be having? So I think starting in that way to remove our own biases or even stereotypes about how we feel towards young people, or specifically teenagers, I think that would be a great start.
Oh, absolutely. I think both of you have touched upon some very important steps. And while this certainly is not within the framework of our discussion today, but with what we have experienced in Buffalo just this week, in and looking at the age of that person, and you talk about relationship building, the fact that, and this is a very subjective opinion on my part, that a person living in their parents' home and having that kind of rage and hatred and mental health problems, and not getting help for that, because it would seem to me that with that relationship, some of this would have come through, and hopefully would have led to uh, not having the destroying and the taking of lives as we saw in what happened in Buffalo. There clearly was no relationship building there. As I said, this was not a part of the overall conversation, but I think mental health and looking at that, and as you talked about relationship building, if either one of you want to make a comment on that, feel free.
Yeah, I would love to. And Buffalo's my hometown, so that is very near and dear to my heart. And family that still lives, my father still lives in Buffalo, so it's shaking us to the core. But I even think about how that then loops back into what conversations are we having about that to our youth, right? And so have we, as a community, particularly the Black community, have we desensitized ourselves in the way that we're not even asking youth how they're impacted by that? Were they expected to get up and go to school and perform at a high rate? Were they expected to form relationships? And so even when we think about the things that happened contextually, are we in our homes? Are the coaches, the bus drivers? There are so many touch points to youth in one day. If you think about it, when a youth walks out the outside of parenting, they probably come in contact with many adults in their day. And who's checking in on them? Who's asking if they're okay? Who's having conversations about an event such as the one that happened in Buffalo? So I think when we think about relationships, it's also important to think that you can build a relationship with a youth no matter where your position is.
Right.
Very good. No, very, very disturbing in all aspects of it. So, what do you think of some of the common signs of emotional difficulties in adolescence that obviously often get overlooked?
I think to start, I think one that tends to be misinterpreted a lot is when an adolescent is withdrawn. Um, sometimes we are so busy as adults, whether it be with our own day-to-day lives, with working, that we just think, we see our daughters, our sons, our nieces, our nephews, we see that they're in their rooms or they're just like completely disengaged, and we just think, oh, it's just them, that's just them being themselves. But it's not entirely true, because it could just be a situation where socially they've become so anxious, and withdrawing is like a safety mechanism for them. If But then there's this like thin line where you don't necessarily want to cross, where you think that you're going to be in their space too much. But if a check-in is a check-in can make so much of a difference, because I've learned that I shouldn't expect a teen to come to me. But instead, if I approach them, and again, if my approach is welcoming, that they will share. And I've experienced that personally at home. But I do think withdrawal is one of them, and it tends to be misinterpreted.
Mm.
And especially, I think, now with, of course, when I grew up, we did not have computers and TV in every room. So if you wanted to watch the television, you had to all be in the same room. And therefore, it was known what shows were being, viewed. And everybody now have the cell phones. They're in separate rooms. They come from school. They go to their room and they do what they do. And I think all of this has led to a breakdown in communication and being able sometimes to identify those sounds. What say you, Rachel?
Yeah, I also think that it is so important to not chop things up to just being an adolescent, right? And so when we see things like that isolation, like wanting to just stay in your room or to just stay on the game or to watch TV, when we see things like those mood swings, we like to just say, oh, that's just like a teenage thing. And so we have to be able to and part of it is because we're uncomfortable, right? Like we don't want to find out what's on the other side of that. It may be mental health related, it may be hormone related. Either way, we're probably in a position where we're not comfortable having an uncomfortable conversation. So I think that between isolation, mood swings, and then just the lack of physical connection, as you talked about, Miss Fields, it is all of those things create a dynamic where you have to be almost super intentional as an adult. Like you have to be almost super vigilant to be sure that you're not just chalking something up to just like, oh, this is just like a teenage thing. And part of that actually takes your ability to manage your own stuff. Right. And so being able to see things for what they are means that you're experiencing that youth for who they are and not who you want them to be or who you thought they should have been or all of those things. Is being able to see that youth for who they are right in front of you. And that kind of goes back to that relationship building stuff. And to your point, Mrs. Fields, do I see this youth regularly enough? Like, are we in the same room? Like, are we like, what does our conversation look like? So, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have children, but I have lots of nieces and nephews and great nieces and nephews. And sometimes when I'm visiting them, or even when they come to visit me in New York, I find myself, probably, they may call it invading their space, but I don't care. I ain't got no space to that extent. But like when I'm visiting them and they're on their games, I just go and sit and say, well, what you doing? How can I learn the game? Try to engage, not for a long period of time. But I find that there is interest in sharing because it's new to me. I don't know the game. So they're teaching me something.
Absolutely.
And I find that to be very rewarding in terms of that relationship building. So what do you think adolescents really want their parents to know and elders to understand, especially since I just talked about I go into the room and
Yeah, I can probably take that one off the top. I really think that they want to be seen as individual people with their own stuff, their own experiences, and I mean, youth of all ages, right? You will see a 5-year-old say, "I can tie my own shoes," because there's a level of independence and pride that comes with that. And so I think that in my conversations with youth, they are their own people that have their own experiences, and it takes parents and elders and adults to be able to recognize and respect that, and that will help you have a conversation about other things that are going on, because now you're going to become curious, right, Mrs. Fields? What's going on? Who are you? Tell me a little, teach me a little something about yourself. The moment I can recognize that you're a different person, it puts me in a different situation to gather information. And so when I can gather that information, it might lead me to more action.
Okay. Derrian, any comments?
Absolutely. I believe wholeheartedly that adolescents, they want their voice to be heard. They want to be respected, like you said, Rachel, as an individual, and they want us to really understand their perspective. I think they don't want to be boxed in just as kids or just as teenagers. I think they really want us to understand them, and even more importantly, to understand and to recognize that they too have mental health matters. So mental health isn't serious when it only involves an adult. Mental health well-being is important as well for an adolescent, for a teenager, and there are some who do know how to articulate this, and they just want to be heard.
You all, both of you have offered such good perspectives on this. And so I like to maybe ask, given the project, and I guess you're more engaged with the project, Darian, as far as the animation and with Columbia and with the public library here in New York City. Can you just speak a little about that in terms of how that is going and why you think it's important and the impact that we're making?
Sure. So this project is actually a little over a year old. We've actually completed a few phases to get us to where we are right now. The initial stage involved hosting focus groups. And I cannot echo enough how instrumental that was to the development of the animated videos, that one of which we watched earlier. So we really got the feedback from each demographic of the community, whether it be elders, definitely young adults, definitely we had a teen concentration. And so a lot of the feedback that we received is what was included in these animated videos. So when you hear that young lady expressing to her dad how she truly felt, that came from some of the teenagers whom we spoke to in the focus groups. And so with the collaboration between Black Health and the public library, we were able to transition into disseminating these videos. And right now, where we are in the process is to engage the community into having public sessions with us at particular library branches. And I have to say, overall, it has been welcomed unanimously with by the community, and they've even the libraries have asked us to return because they would like to continue this type of work based on the reception that they observe from the community.
And that's an excellent segue to the last question that I wanted to raise for both of you, and that is, what are some barriers that prevent teens and adolescents from seeking help from other adults or their communities, as we saw in the animation, the reluctance? So what are some of those barriers that we still need to knock down?
That's such a good question. I think the first piece is representation. So, seeing myself, being able to see myself in that conversation, to speak the same language, to feel like this is a space that I can enter. And when I say that, I mean, that's back to that, those nuggets, those breadcrumbs that we are laying as a relationship. If I don't feel safe, or feel like I can have a conversation or I'm represented in my community, if I feel like my voice is always, no one wants to listen to me any other time, but now you want to listen to me because there's a problem, right? And so I think that the first thing that youth are reluctant or hesitant about is, am I going to be respected and represented in this space? So that's why I think those videos are awesome, because it is what we call youth speak. It is representing a youth. It is 100% about that youth experience that is leading that. The other piece is time, right? And so although that was a great conversation to be had in 3 minutes, youth need time to unravel. They need time to be watered. You have to plant a level of seeds. And if you don't have patience, if you yourself are unable to work through your own things, then that will be one of the things that will keep youth from seeking help and or support. If I feel like you're going to rush my process, or you already have an agenda, if you think that I need to go to a therapist, like if you've already inserted your stuff inside of my stuff, then I probably am going to shut down.
And that's what I'm sure we're seeing a lot of right now, Derrian, in the work that you're doing. Any last minute comments that either of you would like to make that you think we've not fully covered? I mean, this is so incredibly important, and I'm just excited in terms of listening to both of you. Anything that either one of you would like to add?
Just very quickly, I would just like to add that as adults, it would be very helpful for us to understand how vital of a role we play in a teenager or an adolescent's development. If they don't feel like they can trust us with their information, we will never get anything out of them. And then we may end up losing them, meaning they will direct their attention elsewhere. So I do believe that if we are able to approach a situation without inserting our own experiences, or if we are willing to even learn from them, it would make a whale of a difference in terms of the interaction that we have with them and the relationship that we maintain with them.
And you used an important word there, learn from them. And many adults don't want to do that. Well, Rachel and Derrian, I can't thank you enough for joining me today for this show and the information that you have been able to share with us. But for more information about mental health, visit nycwell.cityofnewyork.us. And I also invite you to go to Black Health website, www.nblch, for information on a link addressing mental health that if you can't join today, you can see it at a later point in time. But for more information about our organization, again, visit nblch.org. And also look for us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. The Manhattan Neighborhood Network brings these programs to you to better inform you, the viewer. So please share with your family. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.